IBM for 36 years. What is the biggest difference in industry today versus when you started your career?
Oh, that's a hard one because that's a long time ago. Um, I would say scale. If I had to boil it down to a single word, both in terms of the number of companies and players and interrelationships you had to deal with, but also, of course, in the size of the equipment that we were using and the amount of data that we had. I remember when a megabyte was a big deal. It was like, oh, you have a megabyte of data, how wonderful. Um, and now of course we just laugh. So really, it's all these issues of scale that have changed so dramatically the complexity and the nature of what we do.
Okay. So do you foresee this the issue of scale is going to bring in some new challenges or new opportunities?
All of the above, yeah. I mean, as the scale is increased, I mean, first of all, we have a much richer ecosystem these days, right? Think of how much is, from a development perspective or a researcher perspective, how much is out there in open source that we can take advantage of, but how hard that is to keep track of everything that's going on and do your own original work, right? So, I mean, that's just one very small example of both the richness, the acceleration that gives to our field, but also the complexity and the struggle of that it takes to deal with all that. We've gone through in the data management space real crises when it was clear that scaling and the volumes of data was going to be critical. Mm-hmm. But who had the equipment and the money and so on to do all that? Well, not even IBM Research sometimes, right? For a while, it was really only Google and only Yahoo, and and that made for terrible competition for people who wanted to do research in those spaces. So, again, a wealth of a wealth. I mean, we've been able to make progress by leaps and bounds because of just because of all the data that's now available to us, but the huge challenge of getting access, of having the equipment and ability to go after it, and so on. And so we've had such waves of advances as we figured out some of those problems, like the cloud, right?
Yeah.
That leveled the playing field for a while, and big large data sets that have come along. So right. Yeah, no, it's, I mean, you can cry for the simpler, days of our past, but on the other hand, you can never turn back the clock. And so you may as well just embrace these challenges and see the opportunities in them, right?
Yep. Yes, I agree. We are living in a very exciting time. What I mean, we are living in a very exciting time, and you have seen over 3-4 decades of interesting development in technology and computer science. What do you see as having been your greatest challenges and your greatest reward in terms of your professional career?
Yeah, that's that one. I always struggle with, because everything looks easy once you've done it.
Yep.
The old thing about childbirth, if women remembered the pain of the delivery, they'd never have that second child. So I think, that's a difficult one for me to answer in terms of challenge. The reward part is easier, because that comes in two types, right? There's the reward we get from the impact we've had on people, and that impact comes both in terms of the many people I have been privileged to mentor along the path of my career, or manage, or work with in various ways, but it also comes in what you do with the technology and how that impacts the world. So the biggest excitement for me of my career has been being able to take technology out into the world, change the world really, by enabling people to bring together very different types of data. And it's so hard for people to even imagine a world where you couldn't combine text and video and database data and all of this stuff together. And yet it was inconceivable when we first started doing that work. So it's hard to, again, to see where were the challenges. There were lots of little ones along the way, um, but the accomplishment there and the reward from that, as well as the reward from what I've learned from the people I have worked with and mentored, those are the joys, right?
Right, right. Yeah, it's always people who matters
Yes.
to us, right?
In the long run, that is true. Yep,
Yeah.
that is exactly true.
So, you know, you obviously have working, you know, many team, you know, working many teams and work with many people over the years. And as you know, having working both industry and now in, you know, back to academia, teamwork is critical and essential. So what advice would you give for recent graduate who don't have a lot of experiences working in teams? I mean, especially now, you know, with the COVID situations and also even just the way that we work, you know, this experiences working in team, it's not always there. So what advice would you give them if they
Yeah,
don't have a lot of advice?
it
I mean,
does.
if they don't have a lot of experiences working in teams.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously the high level bit is get some.
Yes.
But you know, that said, right, being part of a team is kind of like being part of a family. It's
Right.
not quite the emotional elements, but you have certain responsibilities, you have a certain role in the family. You have duties that you need to fulfill. And so almost all of us, if we think about it, have a model for
Mhm.
what it's like to work in a team. We don't often
Right.
talk about family life that way, but that's really, it is a team, trying
Right.
to make sure that everybody's getting through and getting what they need. So I would probably tell them, think about high function families that you've seen, right? Or teams on TV, or you know, think about groups that you've seen, and you'll find that it's made up of, you know, very basic principles really form the basis of teamwork, right? So
Right.
make sure that you carry out your responsibilities. If you don't like those responsibilities, negotiate them up front. Don't just fail to do them, right?
Right.
People respond, you know, that are relying on you. Um, Make sure that you communicate. And I'll say probably more about that later because you asked about leadership skills. I know you're going to ask me that. So um, I think within a team, one of the biggest and most important things you have to remember is that not everybody knows what you know. Nobody's doing exactly the same thing. And
Right.
so communication is a really important part of teamwork.
Mhm. Mhm.
Not just assuming that people know what's going on, but making sure that they do and that everybody knows what their assigned tasks and roles are.
Right.
And
Right.
those are really sort of, for me, at the heart of teamwork. You
Uh-huh.
can, you can make it even simpler. You can say, treat your coworkers, you know, as responsibly, right? Be respectful of their time and expertise, and um, then just live up to your responsibilities, and all will be well. It's not magic,
Yeah.
you know.
Okay. That's excellent. That's really excellent advice. And obviously you being a leader in the field and you're currently the dean of your college. So what would be the best leadership lessons, you know, that you have learned through all these different leadership roles that you have throughout your career?
Yeah. So again, communication is usually number one
Mhm.
thing I say to people, because um, it's so important. If you can learn to tell people what they need to know and what they need to hear when they need to hear it, and to listen to people and really understand what is motivating them, what they know, and so on, um, people will follow you anywhere just because they feel like you listen and they feel like they're part of again, a team that is really going someplace, right? So communication is just really the most fundamental thing for me. It's making sure that you're sharing what you know, and listening for what the others know, and working together.
Great. Yeah, this is definitely a very valuable lesson for many of us, because often we focus on the work, we don't necessarily focusing on, delivering the messages and
Yeah.
communicate what we know.
I think
So
I would
yeah,
just,
go ahead.
I just want to add one thought there, which is part of communication. I talked about sort of the two-way street you got to listen to, but another thing is learning to say thank you, and to acknowledge a job well done, because it's so cheap. It's so little to give people, and yet people will work so hard for those thank yous, and for a person that they feel really appreciates what they're doing. So it's an thank you is a leadership skill, as it turns out.
Okay, good to know. Okay, this is great. So how do you continue to learn, uh, given you have so much to do, and yet you manage to stay on top of everything?
Oh,
So what's your secret?
I certainly don't stay on top of it. Spread that rumor. People will think it's hopeless. No, there's formal learning and there's informal learning.
Mhm.
And so the nature of the job you do, whatever it may be, I certainly found this both in my career as an executive at IBM, but also here in academia as a dean. Um, you're always being exposed to new information. And so I try, when I try to take advantage of the talks, all the various, maybe it's just the candidates coming through in a given year, although not so much of that this year. But the talks that are available to you in a university setting, and going to things in a broad range of areas, taking the opportunity to talk to my faculty and ask questions when I don't understand something. Those sorts of little mechanisms really do help. I did try setting in on like one seminar in an area I really wanted to know more about, but I couldn't be consistent enough on getting to all the classes, and I rarely got the time to do all the reading. And so, um, it helped a little. A little bit wears off, and it's not the same as when you can dig in and take purposeful time. So I find a lot of the learning really is informal. It's just from doing my job, more or less. So, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a great attitude and also great advice for many of us. Just pay attention to what we do on day-to-day basis and learn as we go. So thank you so much, Laura. I just want to say, thanks again for taking the time to share your wisdoms and your lesson learns over the year with us. On the behalf of IEEE Computer Society, I want to thank you again for doing this.
My pleasure, and it's so nice to talk to you, and to catch up after all this time. So great to see you. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Okay, bye.